For more on this, I'm joined by the friend of the show, Jason Stanley. He's a professor of philosophy and the chair in American Studies at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. He's also the author of the remarkable book, Erasing History: How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future. This is so central, Jason, to some of your work and some of your thinking, that storytelling is such a powerful tool utilized by authoritarians. It is often more effective than brute force.
That's right. I mean, first of all, I want to take a little issue with your comparison to the McCarthy era. 40 academics were dismissed over their posts about Charlie Kirk. I'm not aware of such a rapid mass firing of academics in the McCarthy era.
Wow.
So I think to some extent, this is much worse than the McCarthy era. We've had countless people fired across countless industries. We had the Washington Post fire Karen Attiah, their only black opinion columnist remaining, for utterly innocuous posts claiming it was over Charlie Kirk. Basically, people are targeting anyone whose political opinions they don't like. Looks like, see, the Washington Post took these innocuous comments. Attiah is left-wing, so they targeted her, or, Attiah is a journalist, so she's neither left nor right, but she didn't fit in with their new mandate. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take this as any excuse to target people whose political orientations, whose truth-telling really does not fit their narrative. And I think that they're throwing everything at this. This is more than McCarthy. It's what this is. It's an attempt to invoke the Insurrection Act, as you said. So what they're trying to do, there's two historical antecedents to pay attention to here. And I'm not saying that we only need to draw from Europe, but they know these historical antecedents. The first is the Reichstag fire, when allegedly a communist burned down the German Reichstag, and Hitler used that. Hitler flooded the streets with Sturmabteilung, with his sort of official thugs, which is sort of equivalent to, analogous to what it looks like is happening with ICE. And then extreme voter intimidation happened. And then after the election, he passed the Enabling Act to take full power. So that seems to be a very clear antecedent here. And the other, of course, is Kristallnacht, when a German diplomat was assassinated in Paris by a Polish Jew, and they called for the targeting of Jewish shops and synagogues.
So let's talk about, there are two arguments here. One is setting up for the Insurrection Act from a legal perspective. And one of the reasons our reporting indicates that it hasn't been done yet, because Donald Trump toyed with this in his first administration after the George Floyd protests, is because his legal advisors told him it won't hold up. So they're still working on that. What's the benefit of casting dissents, whether it's journalists or nonprofits, as sort of terrorists? What does that do? And going back to the Reichstag fire, what help is it to convince the public of this?
Well, I think they're actually moving. They're not successfully convincing the public. I think they're trying to convince the public, but I think they're going to do it anyway because they're treating the domestic political opposition, the Democrats, as what did Stephen Miller call them? A domestic extremist organization, I think he said. So they're going to try to act on that anyway. That's what they're going to push on. It's not just as the Nazis called the Social Democrats Marxists and communists, they're going to call the Democratic Party, Democratic politicians, radical left. In fact, there's not much radical left in the United States, of course, and they're trying to broaden that to it certainly include anyone who calls them a fascist. So right. They're really trying to say anyone who quite accurately calls them a fascist, because what is it to claim that anyone who calls you a fascist is a terrorist and needs to be arrested? That looks like fascism. So they're saying they have this incredibly broad net of who counts as a terrorist, of who counts as an extremist, and they're going to use that to justify it, but they're going to try to do it whether or not the public is going along with it. And what we're seeing is the public is not going along with it. And that is very powerful. I don't actually think that the the attempt to turn Charlie Kirk's terrible assassination, tragic assassination, into a kind of end stage moment of seizing total authority and throwing everyone in prison, I don't think that worked, because I think there was enormous pushback. And what we can see from that is pushback helps. They're going to try to do it no matter what, but they can be stopped.
You make an interesting point. The radical left becomes an empty term after a while, because virtually none of what they accuse people of being the radical left of is radically left. America is not a radically left country. This becomes really anybody who's critical of Trump or critical of fascism or authoritarianism. And the loose concept of making Antifa into a terrorist organization, given that you can't declare an American organization a terrorist organization, and given that Antifa is not really an organization, means that all of us can be rounded up as terrorists, because there's no real definition to it.
Absolutely. All political opposition are to be labeled as terrorists. And the media is saying this is all trolling. You know, saying Trump putting Trump 2028 hats on the Oval Office desk is trolling. It's not trolling. This is, I think we are facing the moment at which a coup is happening. I think this is the moment. And full societal resistance to that is necessary. So nonviolent resistance. And verbally, they're saying don't call them fascists, joke about it. They're also saying certain political views are not on the table. We do, in fact, have a very popular democratic socialist movement, which is not a radical left movement in their sense. It's a nonviolent movement. It's a movement that wants people to live affordable lives.
Yes.
It wants them to have health care. And what we have, that I think Zoran Mamdani's campaign is very important now, because Zoran Mamdani is showing that people across the political spectrum care about living lives of dignity, living lives that are affordable for them. And you know, if they're going to paint that as radical left, that's not going to go well for them as the future proceeds, if we can keep elections.
Well, Donald Trump's gone as far as to call him a communist. I mean, Zoran Mamdani would be very recognizable to Canadians or Western Europeans as a mainstream political actor who's somewhat on the left, not as a communist. Jason, stay right where you are. I'll come back and continue this conversation with you on the other side. You're watching Velshi on MSNBC. I'm back with Jason Stanley, professor of philosophy and chair in American Studies at the University of Toronto Munk Center. Jason, you brought up an interesting point, and we might just see this play out in the next few weeks in the election in New York. But this is a way in which people can push back. The things that Zoran Mamdani wants, and you can like his policies or you can not like his policies, and I'm cool with either one. But it's not radical and it's not violent.
Yes, making people's lives affordable is not radical. Providing free bus service and childcare is not radical.
Republicans in New York have suggested free bus service in the past. Like, it's not a radical idea at all.
It's not a radical idea at all. The idea behind the democratic socialists is to have government work for the working class. That's not a radical idea. What we have now is we have a classic structure of an autocrat throwing cultural meat on the fire, saying, okay, look at these hippies, look at these radicals, and then using that to justify taking away people's health care. Radically
Literally
redistributing wealth towards the billionaire class. So we have that structure, and then they're going to accelerate that by saying that anyone who objects to the kind of corruption, the mass scale corruption that's happening to benefit the oligarchical and wealthy elite right now, is on the radical left and shouldn't be allowed to speak. So this is the structure. The autocrat says, I'm going to use violent state reprisals to defend the interests of my own family and the wealthy elite. So now, unfortunately, what we have is a situation where this perspective, this autocratic authoritarian perspective, it controls the Supreme Court, controls one entire political party, and an out-of-control executive branch.
Jason, thanks as always. You make it so much clearer. Jason Stanley is a professor of philosophy and the chair in American Studies at the University of Toronto Munk School of Global Affairs. He's the author of multiple books, including Erasing History: How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future.